So this is the time that many of you enthusiasts are waiting for. The performance for the RX 6900 XT is here. We have tested the card against NVIDIA's most powerful card, the RTX 3090, which is 500 USD more expensive than the RX 6900 XT. So other than the price, you guys really wanted to know if this is really the 3090 killer. So compared to the RX 6800 we've reviewed last time, you can check out the link below in the description if you missed out that review. But if we compare to that card, this 6900 XT feels a lot more premium in terms of the packaging because it comes in a hard cardboard box. So opening the box, we can see that, well, there's a welcoming message from AMD because you purchased their flagship card. So inside the box, you can see that it's pretty much similar to what we've seen from the 6800, which is this cover. Not sure what should I call it, but underneath the cover you will find a piece of paper which gives you the information for general safety guide and a QR code that leads you to the product page itself. And surprisingly, they did provide you a keycap. Not sure if you will like this, but it's better than having nothing at all, right? So lifting the entire thing up, you can see that the card is actually wrapped by a mouse pad. So in case if you are looking for a new mouse pad, well, AMD just solved your problem right there. Now back to the card itself, we can see that it's slightly thicker and wider than the RX 6800, but the overall design is pretty much the same. Size-wise, it's definitely smaller than the 3090 Founders Edition, which will take up 3 slots in your expansion slot, and it's also not as wide as the 3090, which has 2 pieces of 120mm fan. And since this is a reference card, you don't get much of RGBs for the card. Technically, you don't have RGB on the card, but you do have the Radeon logo right here at the side of the strap, which will light up in red color if it's powered on. And for the power input, you still get 2 pieces of 8-pin PCIe, which is pretty common nowadays as compared to what NVIDIA offers on their Founders Edition card, which use a rather new 12-pin PCIe power connectors, which is not present on your normal PSU nowadays. Though they do include an adapter, but it looks a bit uncomfortable if it's installed in your system because of that extra adapter. So this is the kind of layout that will help you to make better looking cable management. And yes, this is something that AMD is pushing on for their marketing materials. And for the output, you get similar output as what you've seen on the RX 6800. 1 HDMI, 2 display port, and a single USB Type-C here. So that's pretty much all for the outlook of the card. And without any further ado, let's jump right into the performance numbers, which I guess many of you are waiting for. Well, I can say that this card is definitely firing on 1080p. Though, if you're buying this card, I don't think you will game only on 1080p, right? So, most people that will be getting this card will probably game on at least 1440p or even 4K. So for 1440p, we can roughly see an average of 10 to 15% difference between both cards. And as for 4K, well, the performance difference gets a little bit bigger, which goes up to 20% on average. Now that's only for non-ray tracing. Because if we look into ray tracing, well, AMD still don't have that kind of advantage due to the lack of DLSS. AMD's alternative, which known as Fidelity FX Super Sampling, is still in the making and will probably be available as early as 2021. So as of now, they are at disadvantage when it comes to ray tracing. Though you might not face any issues if you game on 1440p. That's just for 4K because it's too much for the card to handle for now. Now for the temperature, the RX 6900 XT peaked at 82 degrees Celsius after our 4-hour test on firm-up. So that's a pretty high temperature for most of you, and I think it's high as well, as compared to the 3090, which has a gigantic heatsink on it and two pieces of 120mm fans, which explains why the temperature is lower even it's on full load. So if you're not comfortable with the high temperature of 82 degrees Celsius, you might want to wait for the partner cards, which will come in their own custom cooler design, which usually will result in a lower cooling temperature. And since we are testing this card on the latest Ryzen 5000 series, and yes, with a 500 series chipset, this card can perform even better when we enable the Smart Access Memory features, which is only available on the later AMD hardwares. Enabling SAM will give you slightly better performance, though it depends on the game. Some will give you even better performance than without SAM, but that depends on the games itself. Although this is an advantage which AMD have as of now, we can see there are reports saying that Nvidia and Intel is also working on their own alternative for Smart Access Memory, and AMD is actually helping them to achieve that. So, well, kudos to AMD for being so generous. But because Smart Access Memory is still at its very beginning stage, so you won't be seeing too much of a performance boost with existing or older game titles. So it'll take some time for the developers to work with AMDs and perhaps Intel and Nvidia for their upcoming similar features for better performance gain. So it's not hard to tell that the RX 6900 XT is actually a very powerful card, which I might even consider getting myself one. Though during our test, we did encounter some issues with older power supplies. For our test, we have 3 power supplies. One, the Cooler Master V1200 Platinum. So that power supply, if you look at the specs, is more than capable enough to handle the RX 6900 XT. But during our test, probably the power supply has degraded over time. We did trip the safety features quite a few times, and we weren't able to do anything with the older power supply when we tried to load this card. And after switching to a brand new power supply, same model, it works just fine. And we did perform the same set of tests on another power supply, which is the NMAX 1250 watt Max Titan, and it works flawlessly. So I can say that if you're using a really old power supply, you might face some issues if the power supply has degraded over time. Power supply aside, we do encounter another rather interesting issue, which is a blue screen with the latest Windows 10 20H2 build. Now this happens only on our AMD system because we have tried the same SSD on our Intel test bench. It works flawlessly. So after various tests, I can tell that the new build seems to have some issues with our AMD hardware. I've tried with Ryzen 5000 series CPUs and even the previous Gen 3000 series CPUs. The problem still occurs. And guess what? The main culprit that caused this blue screen, it's a lot of blue screen during our test, is actually the Windows activation client, which is known as slui.exe. So for our case, the solution is really simple. We just reactivate our own copy of Windows 10 and the problem just goes away. So if you're having the same issues, this might help. Now looking at how the RX 6900 performs, I would say it's a pretty good first attempt for AMD with their first card with ray tracing features, even though it's not as powerful as the 3090 in terms of high resolution gaming, and of course ray tracing performance, I would say it's still a very powerful card you can get nowadays, especially when it's priced at $999 US, which is $500 US cheaper than the 3090. And in terms of 4K performance, you're just like losing 20% out of it. So it's still not bad, I would say. Though if you're really looking into ray tracing, well, you can either game on 1440p or perhaps wait for AMD to finally come up with their own version of DLSS alternative, which is the Fidelity FX Super Sampling. As those of you who are planning to get this card for content creation, well, you might be losing some of the advantage which NVIDIA cards have, especially for the dedicated RT cores and Tensor cores, which will help to boost the performance on certain applications because they have dedicated hardware to perform certain tasks which AMD lacks of. Well, there are of course applications that will also take advantage of what AMD has to accelerate your overall content creation performance. But as of now, I would say the RX 6900 XT is somewhat of a card for gaming, I suppose. With that amount of VRAM you have, there's no problem for you to just bump up all the settings, go with high, ultra, or maybe extreme, and you'll still have plenty of VRAM left. But then again, things might change in the future because as soon as AMD rolls out their own version of the DLSS alternative, things might get a little bit different by then. As for 8K gaming, well, AMD still have to work hard on it because even NVIDIA's, they are working hard on 8K gaming because without DLSS, you'll be having a lot of issues when it comes to the performance. Not to mention that 8K display is very expensive nowadays. So I guess that's pretty much it for our review on the RX 6900 XT. And if you guys do have any comments on thoughts regarding this card or perhaps the 3090, you can let us know down in the comment below. And that's all for the video today. I'll see you guys in the next one.